Hey everyone, welcome back to your private podcast feed. I am still Michael Stephen Fuchs, author of the best-selling ARISEN Special Operations Military Post-Apocalyptic Epic series, and it has been a while. Though, trust me when I tell you that you all are never far from my thoughts, including because your lovely messages are constantly coming in and with seemingly uncanny timing, always supporting me and buoying me up when I need it most. I always respond personally, so do hit me up anytime on any channel, except this one, obviously, which is broadcast only. So, if I'm honest, this private podcast notion was basically a total lark, one that was suggested by a fellow author and an experiment, and I think I saw it mainly as sort of a, let's call it a limited series, with the possibility of follow-on episodes if I got really inspired. Well, inspiration this time comes in two forms. The first is the imminent launch, finally, and thank Almighty God, of the Audible edition of ARISEN Operators Volume 1, The Fall of the Third Temple, performed by the immortal and incomparable R.C. freaking Bray. And, as many or most of you know, getting here took years and cost thousands of lives. Ops V1, as we call it, was actually the very first book I ever wrote where I agreed to both a hard deadline and a firm word count well in advance. Historically, my attitude's been, the book will be done when it's done, and it's going to be exactly the length it wants and needs to be to tell the story it's telling. I suppose one might applaud my commitment to quality above all else, while still noticing that I was really up my own backside about the whole thing. Thinking of myself as an uncompromising artiste. I mean, seriously, I'm not painting the Sistine Chapel here. And I'm guessing even Michelangelo had a deadline he had to meet for the Pope, not to mention he had only so many square feet of ceiling to work with. So, not for the first time, an argument could be made for me simply getting over myself. But the real issue, of course, was that the world's greatest and most popular audiobook narrator, the great and good R.C. Bray, or as we cool kids get to call him, Bob. Bob was so in demand that he had been getting more and more, and yet more and more, and even more impossible to schedule. And the delay between the original launch of the paper and ebook editions of the ARISEN books and the release of the crazily popular audio editions were starting to be measured in years. Seriously, freaking years. It was kind of out of control. And this was, let's call it a little bit completely frustrating to the devoted and faithful audiobook listeners. It was getting to the point where I couldn't even quite bear to face them with the news I usually had to deliver about when they could expect the damned audiobook. The other striking fact of the situation was that while I refused to commit to or announce hard deadlines in advance, not until I knew for sure I could meet them, I actually always did have internal deadlines, as well as realistic word count targets. And while I never knew for sure that I was going to be able to hit them in advance, I actually always did end up hitting them. And so that made me think a bit. Combine that with my very belated appreciation that audiobooks are, by far, the fastest growing segment of the publishing industry, heading quickly towards becoming the largest and most dominant segment. Another way I was up on my own ass about it was believing, I write books for readers with words printed on pages. And the audiobooks are an amusing but largely irrelevant add-on. I also obviously had to get over that. Anyway, combine all that, and I finally said, okay, audiobooks, I'll do it your way. And I told my lovely audiobook publisher people at Podium Entertainment exactly when I would finish this book and how long it would be. And so this allowed them to schedule studio time for Maestro Bray a full freaking year in advance. Which, it turned out, and hilariously enough, didn't actually help all that much. Because of his ridiculously packed recording schedule, and also because of some health challenges Bob's been dealing with, deadlines just kept slipping anyway, repeatedly, and so now we're finally looking at a release date that's still almost a year after the other editions came out. But, fuck it, that's what we've got, and so I decided to just make a virtue out of atrocity, and am now re-releasing the book in all formats, including doing the fairly basic marketing promotion that I totally neglected to do in the first place because I was totally ignorant of it. More on that, the whole marketing journey, another time. So, Ops V1 audio launch day is next Tuesday, as I release this, I hope. That is Tuesday, 13 August, 2024. Tuesday's launch day, yippee! So to get the audiobook, just to go to Audible and search Operators. You can't miss it. And you can pre-order it right now. You could actually pre-order it since pre-orders went up in, God save me, last October, I think. And so anyway, all this week, in celebration of the miracle, the Kindle edition will also be on sale and heavily promoted for a mere $1.99. That's 2/3 off the list price to $5.99. So if you still haven't grabbed the ebook and want that edition, now, before the end of the week, is definitely the time. In fact, and I understand this poorly, but to the best of my understanding, with Amazon's Whisper Sync system, which allows you to switch between the ebook and the audiobook, if you buy the ebook first, again, heavily discounted right now, you also get a big discount on the audiobook. So that's pretty cool. Overall, with the re-release and the audio launch, I'm really hoping to raise the profile of this book and get it in front of the bigger audience I really think it deserves. More on that in a second. But whichever format you grab, I really, really appreciate your always kind and generous and loving support of this release, not to mention your tireless support of its author. The $2 ebook is also a great time to lure anyone you remotely know or have ever even heard about into the series for the first time. You've heard me say it 100,000 times already, and here goes again, because it's true, not to mention really important and special to me, but every time you thrust my books into the hands of friends, family, colleagues, old platoon mates and battle buddies, random dudes walking down the street eating onion bagels, that is seriously the only reason I get to wake up every morning and keep writing these books, because it simply is word of mouth that sells books, period. So it's genuinely you I have to thank for keeping this job. Or, a little more accurately, but even more critically, it's you I have to thank for staying out of any kind of honest, grown-up, jobby job work, and instead just sit here making up crazy-ass stories all day long. As brutally hard as writing is, for me at least, it definitely beats the hell out of working. So one last time, thank you, seriously, with all my heart. So, what's the second inspiration for this new episode? Well, the clue was just there when I alluded to how hard writing is for me and how that plays into the contours of the writer's journey. And it turns out my artist's journey has not stopped, not nearly, just as history never seems to stop. And I realize the prior podcast episodes have left us out of date. So, herewith is a quick update on the last 2 years. If you listen to the earlier episodes, particularly the second one on artists' dark nights of the soul, you'll already be well aware that my writing life, not to mention my life, has very rarely been free of drama. Not to mention struggle, doubt, fear, pain, sacrifice. I wish I could say I broke through all that, finally and for good. What I can tell you, at least, is that I actually did think I broke through it, finally and for good. Which is actually pretty damn good and maybe ought to be enough for anyone. God knows my blessings are legendary, and I can only hope I'm smart and humble enough to try to appreciate them. But anyway, to bring you up to date, as you know, I finished the main ARISEN series by some damned miracle. As you heard before, the last writing cycle, finishing those last 2 books, the climax and conclusion of the epic series, that third of a million impossible words, was by far the hardest thing I've ever done, or I'm pretty sure ever will do. It basically required putting myself into isolation for a year in order to generate the focus I needed to do work of that complexity and quality, and I doubted terribly that I was up to the task. Every day, months past exhaustion, I looked at the dozens of scenes I had left to execute and tried not to despair or give up. I was actually just out there on the same street near where I live, between here and the park, and I remember going for yet another run in high summer. I absolutely hate running in the heat, but that was where all the story ideas and solutions to plot problems came from, so I had no choice but to keep doing it. I remember being in this exact spot and thinking, okay, I've just got to put together another 43 more 3,000-word writing days. That's not so bad. To borrow a line from the Delta operators, I can do 43 days upside down with my head in a bucket of shit, and that's certainly what it felt like. But anyway, in the end, I did it. I pulled the damn thing. So then I came back and I wrote the first non-main series ARISEN book, namely ARISEN Odyssey, which proved a hell of a lot harder and took a much bigger toll on me than I expected, even with its nice, simple, dual protagonist storyline unspooling in a lovely straight line versus the goddamn main series with its 500 named characters and scores of intertwining and intersecting and labyrinthine plot lines. After that, I took 6 months out to write the original screenplay, Black Squadron, which was so brain-warpingly hard it caused me to quit writing forever for 6 weeks. And that story is in the 3rd episode of the podcast. And then I wrote Arisen Raiders, the 5-book prequel spin-off series. That took me 2.5 years and was really hard, but also great, and a really ambitious project. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, but had no real idea if I could do it. And in the end, I really think I pulled that off too. And you all, the readers, seem to agree. To my amazement, actually, a lot of you claim to like it even better than the main series. That was pretty huge for me because for a good couple of years in there, I was absolutely convinced I'd never again in my life do anything remotely as good as the climax and conclusion of the main series. I figured I'd never produce work that strong again because doing it the first time, it very nearly killed me. And I sure as hell wasn't doing that again. And so that also led to the painful problem of, what the hell do you do after your magnum opus? Because if you want to continue to be a working artist, you've got to do something. So I tried not to get too down about having passed my peak and just resolved to try to do the best work I could. And then I wrote Raiders, and people said they loved it more than the main series, and that was equally unexpected and incredibly good for my soul. Maybe I hadn't peaked after all. Stephen King, in his wonderful book On Writing, talked about this problem of having your best work behind you. He said he was very well qualified to discuss it because there was pretty much universal agreement that The Stand was his best book, and that had come out 20 years earlier. Anyway, so what did I do then, having pulled off both the main series and Raiders? Well, I did something totally unprecedented. I took an actual break. A real big, proper, long one. Here's the thing. Here's the problem. Basically, when you start to enjoy a little bit of success in a racket where the odds against success are just stratospherically high, you pretty quickly start to become terrified of pissing it all away. And so that terror just keeps you sprinting flat out, sometimes for years. In one stretch in there, I put out 3 books a year for 6 years running, which is probably not a sustainable pace. I mean, a lot of indie authors somehow manage it or even do more than that, but the way I write, it probably wasn't sustainable. I intentionally geared down a bit for Raiders, dropping to 2 books a year, but when I brought that series home, it just seemed like a stopping point. So instead of instantly getting back to work, blowing my brains out to write the next book, I just stopped. And what did I do during that period? Well, I took a lot of long walks. I did a lot of reading, thinking. Breathing was a major theme. And mainly I got really good at just existing. It was pretty sublime, actually, on those long walks, which I took pretty much daily, rather than, flogging myself out for another hard run every day to generate story ideas. Instead of having my head deep in the new book, I just got out of my own head. Or rather, I got my head straight, painstakingly molding it into a shape that was fit for purpose. That purpose being to be happy, and also, more importantly, I think, to be good. And I achieved something. Please forgive the seeming grandiosity here. I achieved something that I think was really quite close to enlightenment. I'd actually identified, intellectually at least, what I think is probably the secret to life, initially on a big long trek in the Everest region of Nepal and the Himalayas, which I took between writing books 11 and 12 and finishing the series. I won't hit you with that whole deal in this space, but if you're curious, Gunny Blane basically tells it all to Yaz in that beach hut in Raiders Volume 3, I think. Actually, even before that, if I recall, and I don't always recall, I think Noise tells it to that RMP in that truck in book 13 as well. And I also really want to write a whole nonfiction book on this topic called, intuitively enough, The Great Secret, capital G, capital S. During this time off, taking all those walks, I actually identified, believe it or not, 9 nonfiction book projects I've had brewing or simmering over the years. And I made a lot of notes for them. And I seriously toyed with the idea of taking some serious time away from fiction to write them, or at least some. But then Podium came calling. And they were like, hey, remember how you offered to commit to a deadline and word count for the next one? Well, we can go ahead and schedule studio time for R.C. Bray for early next year. That work for you? And so I bowed to what seemed like fate on that one. Really, it was probably the terror coming back of turning down that opportunity and finally really pissing away my career as a fiction writer. And so, hence, Operators Volume 1 got written rather than The Great Secret or The Great Secret Daily Reader or my Writer's Commonplace book or my book on the art and craft of fiction. I actually forget what the other ones were right now. But the point is that during that time off, I really got my head straight. I was just sort. And so finally I came back to the writing desk at the beginning of last year, and two spectacularly unexpected things happened. First, I wrote what I am very, very sure is actually, by far, the best book of my life. And that is the one coming out in audio on Tuesday, Arisen Operators Volume 1, The Fall of the Third Temple. It just somehow emerged like this wonderful, magical, perfect dream. I mean, this book just works. It all clicked. It all hit. I created by far the most psychologically complex protagonist I'd ever written before. And also, believe it or not, the most badass. Her emotional arc and journey in this first volume of the story just fell perfectly into place. And the blistering, ass-kicking, over-the-top action set pieces, all of them thematic and intimately related to her character and journey, just blew the doors off. I mean, this book completely blows the doors off. And it's not just me immodestly saying so. The reader reviews have been pretty emphatic on that point. Like, just when I think the series can't get any better, I get my mind blown all over again. So many of you, so kindly and gratifyingly, have agreed with me in calling it the best Arisen book yet. So, again, I really didn't see that coming, doing my best work ever this late in the day. But you know what I really, really didn't see coming? That I would enjoy nearly every minute of writing it. Don't get me wrong, it was challenging as hell, really ambitious in conception and requiring painstaking work and execution. But I also woke up every single morning for 6 months, excited as hell to get to work on the thing and to spend more time with that character. I constantly thought, I love this book. I love this hero. It all just came together so beautifully. What you have to understand is I'd given up many years ago on writing, ever getting anything but constantly and murderously harder, plus taking a huge toll on me personally. I really thought that was just the price of art. Certainly if I wanted to produce work of the quality you would all come to expect. I just thought the war of art, as the great Stephen Pressfield puts it, was real and would always be bloody. But then, this book. Writing it wasn't a war, it was a joy. I had, somehow, it seemed, after all this time, broken through. I'd found the joy. So, happy ending, right? Well, it turns out there actually are no permanent states of affairs. And as the woman said, we can only live happily ever after on a day-to-day basis. However, I do really want to end this episode on a happy note, so I'm going to leave it there. And it does bring us up to the beginning of this year. Did I mention, on a very personal note, during this period, I also finally met the right girl, just as I was finishing the writing phase of Ops V1. Talk about taking years and costing thousands of lives. Not only had I thought my best work was behind me, not only did I believe writing was always going to be bloody, painful, and costly, but I was also pretty convinced I'd pissed away every chance at happiness and coupledom I was ever going to get, and was definitely going to die alone. And then another miracle happened and Beth came along. So yeah, truly a hell of a miraculous year. So, will Yael, the hero of operators, break through and conquer her demons and save the world and find the joy and live happily ever after in the rest of this series? Well, that's up to me and to you and mainly to her. And it, along with the abrupt interruption of my happy ending that I've experienced this year so far, will be a topic for next time. It is pretty funny how the wheel always keeps turning and the dice are always rolling. So, until next time, I hope you love this new book as much as I do and get some things out of it that help you on your own journey, or at least get 16 solid hours of rollicking and totally ass-kicking drama, action, and entertainment. And I very much wish you your own day-to-day happily ever after. Oh, one last thing. I'm going to be doing another live stream reader Q&A on Facebook on Sunday the 18th, a week after the audiobook comes out, giving you time to tear through it, where I will take your questions and chat with you about the new book and about all things Arisen and MSF and writing. So check my Facebook page for details and to jump into that. On the other hand, if you're listening to this in the year 2037, hopefully you can still find the archive live stream on my YouTube channel, which will hopefully still be there, though hopefully Facebook will be gone. Okay, lots of love, everyone. Be happy, be safe, and go well.